رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وآله وأصحابه أجمعين. Okay, so does anybody have any, last week was spring break, right? Okay, does anyone have any questions on anything we covered up to this part, thus far? Because after this particular discussion, I'm hoping, and if it's possible, that we finish everything up to the wedding today, and then the next week will be, how many weeks do we have left? Do we have a few yet?
Finals week is the second week of May.
So usually nobody shows up the one before that.
So probably the last week of April, maybe the first Tuesday of May, potentially.
Okay, so I'm just trying to see how much. So this is the 26th, and then okay. So then we'll get a solid, inshallah, 4 weeks for Surah Al-Kahf, and then in May everybody can start studying. Okay. Okay, and then next week, inshallah, we are not going to be on Facebook or whatever this thing is.
Yes.
It's going to be no recording, and obviously that's just going to be covering intimacy in Islam.
That's next week?
That's next week. All right, so we mentioned about the ruling on marrying a girl from Ahl al-Kitab, right? We mentioned that. Who's Ahl al-Kitab? Jews and Christians. They kind of Muslim, not Muslim, what are they? Ahl al-Kitab is what?
People of the book.
Meaning?
Abrahamic religions.
Meaning?
Major faiths, great religion.
Meaning? Non-Muslim. Thank you.
Oh.
Just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page, right? So they're the only groups of non-Muslims we're allowed to marry. That's why they're called Ahl al-Kitab. They get specific rulings. And you should know this very well, that if you marry a girl from Ahl al-Kitab, Allah Azza wa Jal still reminds all of us that وَلَأَمَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكَةِ, that a believing girl is far superior in the eyes of Allah than a disbelieving girl. وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ, even if the other one seems to be more pleasing to you, even though she seems to be more pleasing to you. Keep in mind that if you did marry a girl from people of the book and she wanted to hang the cross in your house, she can. If she wants to read the Bible, she can. If she asks you to take her to church, you should. But just make it very clear that the children should be raised Muslim. Questions on that? Pretty simple, right? Keep going. Good. Yes?
That's for all madhabs, right?
Yeah. So Shafi'i rahimahullah was asked that, and he answered it, and not a single scholar contested that. Because when Allah said you can marry a girl from Ahl al-Kitab, He mentioned Assaf as a requirement, meaning she is known to be good in terms of her morality. She's not a fornicator. She's not someone who does bad things like that. So she has modesty. And she's practicing whatever that means. Doesn't mean she has to be going to church or anything like that, but she has to be modest in that regard. And you ask her what she believes in, she says, I believe, Jesus is the Son of God, and whatever, that's their faith. And that's what you take her as. This religion is a very tolerant religion, and if you took the girl from Ahl al-Kitab, that's how you took her. Remember what we said? The day that you go and you ask for the girl that you're potentially going to marry, likewise, sisters, when a guy comes to ask for you, that's who you should assume you're marrying. Now, obviously, we all hope that we get better in the religion as we go on, as we keep learning and studying together, but that's the person you're marrying, right? So if you're marrying a girl who doesn't necessarily wear hijab the way that you might like her to cover, that's who you're marrying, right? You have to recognize that. Okay? Answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, alhamdulillah. All right, so good. Now, the other thing we should mention is that obviously a wali, which is a guardian, should be part of this process, right? And that the waliship always goes to the father. And if the father is deceased, it always goes to the grandfather. If the grandfather, the paternal grandfather, so your grandfather from your dad's side. And if that is not in the area and she was married previously, then it goes to her son. Her oldest son if he's of age. If he's not of age or don't have a son, or that's not the area, then the uncle, the paternal uncle. And if the paternal uncle is not there, then her brother. Okay, and if not, then it finally goes to the imam of the local community. All right? That doesn't go without any big news to anyone. Can a girl get married without a wali? So the overwhelming majority of the scholars said no, she cannot. But some scholars did mention that she can, because Allah Azza wa Jal infers in the Quran that when she marries, the meaning He's putting the amr on her. So that left one group of scholars to say that a sister actually can get married without a wali, although it doesn't seem that it's a strong. It doesn't seem that that's what the majority of scholars agree with. Yeah.
So from my understanding, that's mainly Hanafi view, is that there doesn't necessarily have to be there, but is that even from the witnesses' perspective, I think it's the Shafi'i who says that they have to be witnesses and of good character, but then Hanbali says they have to be there, not necessarily good character, and then I think Maliki says that you don't necessarily need witnesses during the signing itself.
Yeah, so that I could clear all of you from all of the mixed bag of differences of opinion. Let me solve it for you this way. Every marriage contract that you do with an imam in this country has every single opinion covered. Meaning they don't leave it out. The witnesses are there, whether one says you need it or not. Never forget, when they say you don't need it, it doesn't mean it's not recommended, right? But then they make required another thing. Like for the Malikis, the walima is required, right? Because you're not doing the two witnesses. How did Malik, rahimahullah, fulfill the two witnesses? He said, well, if you do a walima, you just did it in front of how many people? Witnesses kind of checked off more than two. You get that point? The purpose of it is to protect the girl's reputation as well as the guy's. So that when you have witnesses and you have a bare minimum of two people and then they're caught. See, you guys have to remember a lot of things in context, right? When the scholars were writing some of these rulings, back in the day, if you've seen two people walking together, news didn't get out as fast as it does with Snapchat and Instagram today, right? I mean, if you use a straw with your soda, we all know at this point. But in that time, if you saw two people walking together, you could be thinking, is this zina? Is this a haram relationship? But then they are absolved of that thinking when the two witnesses said, no, I was there during the marriage. I was one of the two people who witnessed their marriage contract. Why did Imam Malik rahimahullah say, no, the two were not required? If you do a walima, how many people just witnessed it? You see the difference? So rather than going into all of the madahib, which I can, by the way, but I just don't want to, because let me tell you this, if I go into the in-depth by telling you the Shafi'i said this, the Hanafi said this, the Hanabila said this, then this class will need a year over, because it's a lot of details. It's not fair to just tell you, oh, the Shafi'i said this. Well, why did they say that, right? Because I don't think we should be that ignorant, and I believe that that's a form of ignorance, that he said, well, the Shafi'i said this. Well, why? You see, so what I'm going to do here is kind of go along with the reasons more of why did the scholars debate about these issues, and where most of the settled opinions have come. All right. So one way, shape, or form, every one of these requirements or recommendations is in your marriage contract already, right? So whether some of them said a dowry is required or not, everybody's doing the dowry. Whether somebody is saying the wali is required or not, I literally don't know anyone, except in the case of a divorcee, that the wali becomes an issue, or somebody who's recently accepted Islam. Why? Because the ones who required the wali, one of the requirements of the wali is that he's Muslim. So when a sister accepts Islam, or it's not an issue for the guy's side. When a sister accepts Islam, where's the Muslim? So you see, this is where you go to scholars, and it's not just a student of knowledge like myself that would relay information. This is where you turn to them. And what some of the scholars have done is, because a marriage is a beautiful moment. It's not an ugly moment. And just imagine if a girl had just accepted Islam and she's about to get married. This is supposed to be a nice, enlightening moment in someone's life, right? And then she's bringing her dad along, and then what do we tell this fellow? Nothing. You know what to tell him? Repeat after me. Yeah. Why not? Right? Because who is her wali at that point is actually the imam. So he's doing his job, but you're making sure the father is included there, without making him feel kind of freak religion is this, that my own daughter's wedding I can't even witness, or I can't be a part of, if you will. See, so it requires hikmah, it requires wisdom, and a lot of those things you won't find in just reading a book full of rulings. So you have to just keep that in mind as well. All right, so that wali should always be present if possible. And like we mentioned, remember, a marriage is a family, is a family event. It's not just you and this selfish act where I'm going to move on with my life. I'm getting out I'm getting out of this house and I'm out of here. You should be always involving your family. Never forget that, and this is one of my two shit, what allows to keep benefiting from him. He said something really interesting. He said, you could always replace your spouse. We're not saying that that should just be done like without feeling, but you can never replace your parents. They're just there. They're your parents till the day of judgment. And so if you're sitting there and you're going head to head with your parents, oh no, this is the one, rather ease them into the situation, right? If this is a person you really want to get married to. It's not just my way of the highway type deal, okay? I'm not gonna go into all the little details like about what they also mentioned that the wali should have, but just simply put, they said his religion, Muslim, and I mentioned if he wasn't, physical maturity, bulugh, sanity, mental maturity, not being in a state of ihram, and practicing, right? The practicing, some scholars included, but actually it shouldn't be included. Why? Because like Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah mentioned, he said if we made practicing one of the requirements of the wali, the overwhelming majority of the marriages would not be accepted, not be correct today. Not everyone's practicing, but they do believe a lot of them. Anyhow, so just to continue, we mentioned that there's a person who's doing the commissioning. If you did not do a marriage contract, and now this will fall under your country question, if you didn't do a marriage contract with an imam in a masjid, does the one in City Hall suffice? What do you guys think?
No.
You say no. Anyone else? So as long as all of these conditions are met one way, shape, or form, then the answer is yes, it does. Because the one who writes the contract itself does not necessarily have to be Muslim. Never forget that. The one who's documenting it. And what is it? What is the most important one that all have agreed on? Is offer and acceptance. So if the person who's writing the contract, usually it's the clerk or the secretary, she says, okay, honey, what's your name? Give me your ID. And you're agreeing to marry this fellow over here. And what's your name? And give me your ID. And it takes it, and then you both say, yeah, there is an offer and acceptance there. That's the most important thing. Because a marriage in Islam cannot be forced. It cannot be forced. It is invalid if it's forced. So as long as the one who's documenting it makes sure that both sides are agreeing, that's the most important. And that is the basic premise that every scholar will agree on. Now, a wali, we hope that she can take her dad along with her to that to the city hall and get that done. Obviously, this goes without saying, but a bride and groom, right? Today, there might not be the case. Anyhow, the dowry, according to some of the scholars, but it's not required if it was not mentioned in the contract. So, anybody here done a contract with City Hall? No? Okay, well, hopefully you will one day. I've done it, and the dowry is not mentioned on there, right? So it's not required. In some of the scholars said it is, but you know it between you guys in agreement, right? When you came to ask for her, and the witnesses in the contract, when you sign it, they do have witnesses. There are 2 witnesses that attend, just so you are aware, in City Hall. Mind you, if it was just a female, they would allow that, right? They would allow that. Just keep these things in mind. And obviously, mutual consent is an absolute must. Okay, so the answer is yes. If you went to City Hall and those conditions are met, then you can get it done. Why do a lot of the people just go to the imam? Because they feel safer. They feel like it's more complete. They won't leave anything out, and they'll include that. And it is safer. And I would tell you, sisters especially, if you meet any girl who recently accepted Islam, do everything in your power to make sure that the local imam in her area is really watching out for her. Like, for example, one of my teachers, he actually was doing the marriage contract between a brother and a sister who recently accepted Islam, a new Muslim sister. And he's like, okay, what was the mahar agreed upon? And she goes, what's that? And he goes, you could put like what you like, put whatever you like. He goes, no, because this is her right. This is a gift to her. It's not like whatever you want. So he explained to her, he said, in the Islam, the marriage contract, he's going to give you a gift to show his seriousness and how much he's caring for you, and he wants to show you his responsibility in committing to the marriage. She said, what kind of gift? He said, usually a gift of value, of money. She said, any amount? He said, any amount. He goes, she said, what do the other girls get? He said, typically they range, I've seen some from 5,000, and now you see the guy sinking in his chair. He thought he was really getting a deal here, stuff going on. And he said, and some of the girls take 30,000. She goes, for what? What do they have to give in return? He said, nothing. It's a gift. He said, no, I was never told. And she gives him this look, and he goes, well, the average is 10. She said, then I'll do the average. And here's this guy just sinking in his chair, thinking like, man, I got one. Well, alhamdulillah, and that's one of the purposes of the wali, that he's looking out for the best interests of this girl, of this particular female. The dowry itself, where and who does that go to? The dowry, and this is very, very important, it goes 100% to the girl. 100%. Some people believe that the father should get some, and this is absolutely un-Islamic. This dowry, which is a gift to the girl, it goes 100% to her and her only. Very, very clear. Okay, and if you're going to give a gift, it should be something pure, something that is halal, something that has value. The Prophet ﷺ said, give a gift of dowry, even if it be a iron ring, even if it be an iron ring. So number one, you take from that, hey, engagement rings are halal. Here we go. That's nice to know. And then the other thing you recognize, that has to be something of value. So it can't be something just nothing. And it has to be something known. If it's and it also has to be something that she can use in terms of the monetary value. Some of the scholars said it's part of the contract, and some of the scholars said no, but it should be agreed upon. Is there a minimum and is there a maximum? The answer is there is no minimum, like we mentioned, but it has to be something of value. Is there a maximum? The answer to that, in the stronger opinion, is that there is no maximum, right? Because Allah Azza wa Jalla mentioned in the Quran, He used the word qintar, which means like mountains of wealth. So it's on what everyone can afford. I mean, you look at what some of these Muslim princes around the world are able to give in dowry. I mean, it's very different than what people like us can afford to give in a dowry, you know? But it's just a nice gift for the sister. Like we've seen, and some of our teachers have been involved in a dowry by extremely wealthy people, multimillionaires, where they gave the dowry as $250,000. And so that's a lot of money. And some even dinar, which is almost double that. So for us, you know, whatever the amount is. Now, if you forgot to do that, and later on you recognize that you forgot to do that because you should give it, then we say the following. We look at what the average was that the girls in that area got. For example, you go to his sisters. What did his sisters get? What did her sisters get? You average that together and you should be giving that dowry. When should it be given? It should be given right before the consummation happens. But if you delay part of it, you can also do that. So if I give you $10,000 as a gift right now, and you're free to do what you want with it, versus I'll give you the other $10,000 as soon as I'm able to, right? Some people put conditional dowry, and that is an acceptable practice. So for example, they'll say her mahar mutakaddim, which is now up front, where her gift is $15,000, but her mutaakhir, her delayed, if there is a divorce, is $100,000. What that means is that if something didn't work out between the two of you and you divorced her, you owe her $100,000. That's something you can agree on as well, right? So you can do that as well. I'm just trying to see. Some scholars said that, you know, that the least amount of mahar that you put in a marriage, the more barakah there will be in the marriage. Majority of the scholars actually consider this hadith weak, just so you're all aware. I know the brothers are like, man, that was my riding horse right there. But unfortunately, in chapter 4, verse 20, Allah mentions the mountains of gold. So there's no maximum. Okay? Some scholars did put a minimum, just so you know, which they said 10 dirham. Okay, just, I don't know if you were hearing of that, but it doesn't matter. That's just a researched opinion. That's based on what they were seeing at their time. But this religion will be until the day of judgment, and there is no minimum, as we know. And you can't even fixate the amount. Like Umar radiallahu anhu, at his time, he tried to fixate the amount. And there was a sister, a Muslim sister, who corrected him. She said, "Oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, you're putting something, you're putting a condition upon something that Allah and His Messenger did not put on, and you have no right to." He thought about it and he said, "Wallahi, Allah forgive me," and he took off that ruling immediately. She corrected him. It just goes to show you how open the dialogue was between the highest Muslim leader in the world versus, this was an ordinary woman, by the way. It wasn't like she was the lead, like, so there was a sister who, there was a Muslim sister, female, who was in charge of the marketplace. It's not like she was one of these high positions that anybody could speak to him like that. And she corrected him and he changed it right on the spot, which was nice to see. Okay, so anyhow, when is the girl entitled to half of the dowry? When a separation is done between them before consummation. Before consummation, she's entitled to half of it. Okay, we mentioned that as well. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else. Okay, now what about putting conditions in the marriage contract? Like, if you marry another girl, I'm entitled to a divorce. You're not allowed to marry another girl while you're married to, right? Conditions like this. So, as a general rule, never forget this, the Prophet ﷺ said, any condition not found in the Book of Allah and not the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is invalid even if you write it 100 times. Is invalid even if you write it 100 times. This led the majority of the scholars to say that you're not allowed to put any condition that's not in the Quran and Sunnah in the contract. However, and this is where the Hanabila actually took a step back and said, well, wait a minute. These marriage contracts fall mostly under mu'amalat, under dealings with one another. So if that's the case, if you look at business contracts, there's tons of conditions. But what we would say is you can make any condition you want, it just can't contradict the Quran and Sunnah. You get it? So for example, if a girl is very, very comfortable living in New Jersey, by the way, before I even start with these conditions, I will caution all of you, do not get excited about this part. Because the more conditions you start putting in this contract, the more you're hindering your ability to have a blissful marriage just from the get-go, right? Just imagine that you're marrying a guy that has an amazing potential in his field, likewise, and maybe the other way around, and then you put something in the marriage contract that says I'm never moving outside of New Jersey. Okay, well, that is a valid condition because there's nothing haram about that. There's nothing impermissible. But then you're coming down to a problem that now you're sitting there saying like, okay, now he has to sit there and only look at these opportunities. What if the economy in this state goes really bad versus another area? So you're just, don't get so excited about these things, but they are valid, right? You can put a condition that she gets a housemaid, right? You can put that condition. That's a valid condition. The problem is that could be costly and he might not be able to afford that long term. I just want you to think about these things, but these are valid. There might be a condition that you have to get her a car. Things like that. These are okay, there's no problem. There might be a condition that, yeah, you guys can get married, but she has to finish her education. Again, right? These are all things that are absolutely allowed. Okay? Now, so what if you said something along the lines of, well, there are impermissible conditions. So some people might say, okay, we could get married, but we're never to have sexual intercourse. This is an invalid condition by agreement of everyone because it violates one of the principles of the marriage itself. Or she might say, okay, we can get married, but you can't ever see me without hijab. Weird condition, but it's not allowed. Absolutely not allowed. Somebody might say, okay, we can get married, but I don't want kids. We're never to have children. I'm writing it down in the contract. Invalid condition, you see. Now, there's certain things that are valid and you can word them a certain way. Like, for example, if you're just not comfortable with your husband marrying another girl while he's married to you, you can write the following. But obviously, again, I caution you to write these things even to begin with, but if you said something along the lines of, if you do marry another wife, I have the right for a divorce with my full financial requirements, like the nafaqah. So even my money that I don't have to pay you, for example, because if she asks for khulq for no reason on her end, she has to repay him all of the valuable things that he's gotten her up till that point, which could be quite costly. But rather, she can say that I don't have to pay anything. I have the right to leave the marriage, right? And what's the difference between writing that condition or not? You have the right to leave anyway. You have the right to leave anytime you want. It's just at that point, you're not financially obligated to pay anything back. You understood the main difference there? No? Yes? Okay. There are some types of marriages that are prohibited, never forget them. Any marriage with the intention of divorcing eventually, like you're marrying her. So some people might marry for a green card, for citizenship. This marriage, you're actually doing something haram. You're actually doing something that's blameworthy and that is punishable in the sight of Allah, with Allah. So this is something very important. Is the marriage invalid if you had that intention? It's not invalid, because the scholar said perhaps he can change his intention as he went along, or her. You never know which side it comes from. But nonetheless, you need to be going into a marriage with a full commitment. Zawaj al-mut'ah, yeah.
What if there's an agreement that, like on both sides, that the marriage is for, like citizenship or whatever?
Still haram. Yep. So even if it's for both sides, even if it's agreed upon both sides. So the other thing is zawaj al-mut'ah, and this is a temporary marriage, and essentially it says, hey, what's today's date? The 26th. Yo, we'll get married the 27th, and what does it take us? 5 hours. We'll get married by night, by 12 a.m. We'll get divorced by 12 a.m. So we'll be married for 6 hours. Or zawaj al-mut'ah, we'll be married for a week. Things like that. This is absolutely haram. It was allowed for one specific time. But after Fath Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ said that zawaj al-mut'ah as well as the meat of the donkey has been prohibited. It's not like they go hand in hand. It's just those two things immediately after the conquest of Mecca, those two things have been made impermissible. So if you sit there, I know a lot of, not a lot, one particular sect in Islam allows it, and they allow a lot of other things as well. So. But we're going by actual textual evidence. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to see any other types of marriages. Okay, there's also something called nikah al-misyab, which is kind of like a friendship type marriage, and just to tell you, this is debated. It's not by all the scholars that is in agreement that it's a marriage based on friendship. That maybe the girl is a woman is a lot older in age and she just wants companionship. The majority, not the majority, they're kind of split halfway, but this is not a recommended marriage. This is not a recommended type marriage at all. But it seems that it has some evidence to it. Okay? I'm trying to see anything else. Fine. Yeah, go ahead.
What would be the difference between that and Rasulullah's marriage, like Sauda, for example?
Explain.
Is because, I guess if it's just companionship, then that goes under the condition that you were saying that there's no relations. But if I know the Prophet ﷺ married Sauda, who was older, but that's a fine marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can marry a woman who's older than you. Absolutely. I know some prefer that. Right? If you look at all the marriages of the Prophet ﷺ, every type of female is checked off with one of them. Right? A family member, a distant person, somebody who was of Ahl al-Kitab, Christian or Jewish background, all divorced or virgin. So, right, every kids, no kids, they're all checked off. Every time, older, not older, younger, they're all checked off, right? Every type. So every kind that you're thinking of will probably be, you'll find an example of the Prophet had that marriage. Okay, now we're gonna go over the wedding night quickly. I think we can get it done. So the wedding itself, the majority of Muslim scholars said it's highly recommended. Obviously, like somebody here mentioned, according to Imam Malik and some of the Zahiris, it's actually obligatory. And we mentioned why, right? Because he kind of says that the witnesses aren't required. So when you look at them, they're all fulfilling the intent of it one way or another. Again, don't go too crazy into all that, because alhamdulillah, every marriage I've seen has every box checked off for the overwhelming part anyway. Okay, the timing of the walima, the timing of the marriage itself, of the celebration, the wedding event, the Prophet ﷺ would actually have this celebratory event after he consummated the marriage, believe it or not. So afterwards, he'd be celebrating with his friends, he got married and family and whatever, but it's absolutely allowed if you did it before the marriage, kind of the practice that we do in the United States, and actually for the most part around the world from what I know as well. So if you did it before or after, either one is fine. Either one is fine. However, extravagance is absolutely forbidden. Like in Surah Al-A'raf, Allah Azza wa Jal clearly mentions, وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا, that Allah Azza wa Jal says very clearly, do not do sarf. And sarf is spending any type of money on something haram. So it's something impermissible. So whether we want to know this or not, you have to recognize where you're doing this and where it becomes allowed, not allowed. And as sad as this is, I know of some Muslim weddings that have an open bar with alcohol. May Allah protect us. And I know other people who sit there and they're playing every type of music you could possibly think of. So what type of music is allowed at a wedding? And if you want it to be on the 100% safe side, you will do it with the duf, which is essentially a drum, if you will. If you want to start, so there's a range, okay? I'm going to give you that range. If you want to be on the absolute safe side, it's having a musical band that's only using the duf instrument. That some scholars, even on the safe side, have allowed also the bells, because they said the bells have been forbidden for a different reason, right? And if you want to know that reason quickly, there's a narration where the Prophet ﷺ said that the bell is impermissible because the angels run away from it when the church rings the bell because they hear people calling others to do shit. So it's not necessarily for the musical part of it, but whatever. That's what allows some scholars. I'm starting to shift this way for you. There's even a further side than that, which is lectures and nasheed. Don't do it. I'm not even kidding. I have declined every single invitation that I can get asked to do a lecture at a wedding. Every one of them. Why? Oh my God. Because that's not what the wedding is for. That you missed the point. It's a time that everybody's celebrating. We're not with our notebooks, may Allah reward you, taking notes out of walima. This is just weird. I'm being absolutely frank with you. And they're this side. And unfortunately, this group here is what's categorized as our religious group. And it's not fair. I mean that. I mean that very, very wholeheartedly. It's not fair because I wish they would see that that's not the case. Because the Prophet ﷺ very clearly in the narration allowed the exception to use that instrument at times of celebratory events. So somebody wanted to do a graduation party, no problem. Somebody got married, no problem. Things like that. These milestones in life. And then now we're going to start shifting to the old other side, right? Bon Joviing it up and whatever else is out there. So now you're going to start shifting. Some scholars said, because it's so difficult to find that kind of music, right? We'll allow any kind of music at the wedding as long as the wording itself is wording that is not enticing to something impermissible. Like, I don't know words. I don't know, back then I used to listen, alhamdulillah, don't say words because then you're going to try to do this thing and everybody knows that you're not doing the right voice. Just comes out wrong. But what I'll tell you is that a lot of these songs entice you to go out partying, falling in love in these impermissible ways. They're just not allowed. At the same time, what wouldn't be allowed is if that type of music is used in haram scenes. So clubbing music and all that kind of stuff, they would say that this is also not allowed to be used. And that's why you'll see even some of the scholars in our area who are flexible to, I wouldn't say flexible, they're of the opinion that you can use other instruments as well. It's because they still wouldn't allow some of the more Americanized cultural music that you're used to, okay? Even then they wouldn't allow that. And then it just keeps going, and then some of them just allow anything on earth, okay? All right, so anybody not clear about that? Because if I was gonna go into a real in-depth discussion about music, It would take us at least one setting. Yeah.
Did you say the walima is required? I didn't catch that.
So no one's, so according to Imam Malik, it's required, but according to the majority, it's highly recommended.
If you just want to do like nikah, that's it, is that fine?
As long as you have enough witnesses,
Okay.
right? Just make sure, obviously when you get married, you're not just gonna go with 2 people. That would be weird. I don't even know anyone who does that. Obviously everyone in your immediate family knows, everyone in her immediate family knows, and you're at least fulfilling that, right? Right, you get that point? Okay, and just, yes, okay. No, go ahead.
So regarding the music,
Mm-hmm,
can it be a romantic music
yeah,
that makes you emotional?
hey, how about that, right? All right, candling it up and everything. Can it be romantic music that makes you emotional?
Like if
The
you take
answer-
it from a movie, that movie is not halal.
Like, you mean like, let it go? No,
You mentioned the word like it should
I'm
not
not
be
good with that,
used
clearly.
in a
What?
haram place or in.
so if it's an acapella, or is that what you're asking, kind of deal?
Are you familiar with Indian music?
Yeah, that's what I'm.
I'm not familiar with any music, let alone Indian music. I would love to, if that was halal,
No,
Indian,
Yeah,
no
I'm
problem.
actually.
Yeah, the one you're
Yeah,
referring
I'm
to.
talking about
because
Indian
you said
music.
no.
So here's what I'll tell you. Again, use this as your guiding rule,
From Bollywood.
right? So when I got married, what I did is I asked my aunt to go in downtown Ramallah. This is a town in Palestine, and I told her to find me the equivalent of. So what they do is there's some singers who will actually copy a song, but in a halal version of it. Okay, so everybody who's memorized, I know this is kind of cheap. See, the funny thing is, for me, it didn't make a difference. But for the people who know the words and who know this jam and whoever else, whatever the beats are, they're just like, what? This is butchered the words and this is not it. You know, so they're not down with that. But however, you can find some very similar stuff out there. I'm sure in India you could find something very similar. But I will say this, there is some leeway, especially at a wedding. There is some leeway, okay? That's not the end all be all, but if I would tell you that if you wanted to be safe, remember what I said when we began? If you want to play it safe, you'll try to find that music that is here. If you absolutely did everything you can, then you know between you and Allah, right? Just keep that in mind. But I will mention, as long as there's more problematic things that take place in a wedding, which is what I want to make sure we cover, that's more dire to be focused on as well. Okay, not to say that music isn't a problem. It really does ruin the heart, just so you're all aware. And you see those people, right? You know, they get all emo, they stick their bows titties like this big, and then they just go in the corner of their bed, and it's on repeat for like 600 times, and then you don't know what time of day it is. And that's all just because somebody who they had a crush on got married, and there goes their chick. But it's just weird. The shaitan has a way of getting to us. But keep in mind too, I'm not making fun of people who fall in love. That's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we don't have control over our heart. I mean that. What you have control over is the actions that you take. And I promise you this, and I mean it. If you follow all of the actions that the Prophet ﷺ told you, that Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned in the Quran, then you at least can safeguard your emotions, right? You can protect them from really dumping down into depression mode because that love of your life isn't working out. Because you're now guarding your gaze, you're limiting the interaction, you're not flirting with them, you're not winking every once in a while and letters and whatever people do. I don't know, right? So keep that in mind. Back in the day, it was a poke. Facebook had poking.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's weird. They still have that, by the way?
No.
I don't know. Nobody has Facebook anymore now. You're considered old and weird if you have Facebook. I'm serious. That's what I started teaching at some high schools, a few lectures, so I stopped telling them to have Facebook. So I think I'm weird. They do Snapchat and Instagram. Period.
Yep.
Yeah, you're on that group. That's okay. No problem. That's all right. Okay, alhamdulillah. Don't worry, you'll be outdated tomorrow. The technology is just updating. All right, so let's see. Okay, so any money that you spend in haram is considered sarf, and Allah Azza wa Jalla prohibited that. So and I want you to keep in mind, if you spend $5,000 on this band who's going to sing all this haram stuff and use all this, it's sarf. That you have to acknowledge you're actually doing something haram. But I also want you to keep the following in mind, that you're not just like, oh, it's one night. Please, for the love of Allah, do not have that mindset. Because you can very well die on your wedding night. and you do not want to meet Allah that way, right? And there's certain things that you just don't want to brush off so easily. If you put yourself in debt to show off, like somebody might be making $100,000 a year, and then he goes and spends $100 grand on the wedding. This is soft. This is absolutely wrong, right? Some scholars mention that if you spend your money on things that have no value, that are also showing off. This is where your group starts falling in for the most part. Like they want that stage to come underneath from the floor with smoke and weird things like that. You know, that is considered soft. That is considered soft. Okay? Okay, what if you're invited to a wedding that is halal? Do you have to attend or is it recommended? Well, it seems that you actually must attend, especially if you know it's halal. The Prophet ﷺ specifically mentioned that the rights of a Muslim upon a Muslim are 5, and one of them, he said, is responding to an invitation. According to some of the scholars, that invitation was only for a walima, but it seems that the Shafi'is extended it beyond that as well. Beyond that as well. Any invitation. But anyhow, keep that in the back of your mind. If you're available, you didn't have a previous commitment, and you know that it's a halal wedding, you must attend. Must attend. What about going to a wedding, you're invited to a wedding where you know sins might be occurring? Like you know that there's mixed gender dancing, you know that there's some haram music, you know that there's alcohol being served. So the default ruling, and I never want you to forget this, is that a Muslim should never be attending a gathering in which these haram things occur.
So a non-Muslim wedding?
Same thing, right? Wedding is a wedding. So what I try to do for my non-Muslim friends, I attend the reception at the church, and then that's not the reception. That's at the altar, whatever that part is. What is ceremony? Yeah. So I attend the ceremony, and then afterwards, I tell them, you know, please excuse me, I can't attend the other part, even though I've known these guys for years. So you got that?
Yeah.
So you can go to the church and you just don't have to sing with them and things like that. Yeah.
What if it's a family member?
So I'm gonna get into that. What?
Who is a Muslim?
Oh yeah. So now we get to the next thing. What if it's like, man, it's my brother's wedding. Now what? In a pinch here. So what you look at is the scholar said, if you know that not attending is going to cause a cutting of family ties, and you know that they're just never going to forgive you because you know they don't have that religious mindset yet, and Allah has guided us all, then you should attend, but you should limit your presence as little as possible, right? And you should remove yourself when, at minimum, when those things happen, right? So the default is you don't attend. Next up, man, it's my brother, or it's my sister, and nothing I can do about it. So at that point, you attend. You shouldn't sit there dancing it up, mixed stuff happening, right? And then if there's girls who are getting up and breaking it down, you just walk out, okay? So that should be very important to know, okay? Good. So if you had, what if we had a sit-down dinner with some permissible type music playing in the background? Absolutely allowed. It's not like you can't sit in a mixed type gathering, right? That's something that you got to be mindful of as well. Let me see. What if you're attending a wedding and you're fasting? Yes, sir.
Can you please repeat the non-Muslim invitation?
Non-Muslims invitation?
Yeah,
Yeah, you could go to they go to the church. You could go to the church and you know, enjoy that part.
In what we can participate and what not.
So I would say everything inside that church should be okay. Once they get to the reception becomes the problem. I mean, that's the goal for our non-Muslim companions out here. They just get pissed drunk and they don't remember anything that's happened. That's a problem.
Wait, are we allowed to go into?
That part, no.
No.
What?
The worship area of the non-Muslims. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
Are we? Yeah.
If you
Absolutely.
don't worship, like you can go there.
Yeah, you can. You're asking if you can enter a church? You've never entered a church before.
I
No?
did.
I
Well,
did.
now you're in trouble. You did.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Actually, it's okay. Absolutely
I
okay.
went there.
Yeah, I mean, Umar radiallahu anhu, he entered the Holy Sepulchre Church.
Yeah, I
Mr.
wasn't
Qiyamah.
sure. So.
Absolutely can attend the church. Enter a church. You can enter a synagogue. You can absolutely, obviously be respectful and mindful of things. I mean, my uncle sat on the place where Jesus was supposedly born, and that offended a lot of people, but you can't do that. Don't do that, obviously. That would be a problem, yeah, and then the back.
I went there one time and we also prayed there, and I prayed to Allah to make it a masjid.
MashaAllah. You're on a roll, but man, may Allah marry you 4 women. Yeah.
What about a Buddhist temple or a temple?
What if what?
What about a Buddhist temple, for example, or anything, polytheistic? Are we allowed to go there or
Still,
whatever?
yeah. Because we're not joining them in kumbaya prayers here. You're just going for the sake of your friend asking you to come.
No, if
Or-
it's not a wedding,
Well, you still can enter.
Okay.
Yeah, you can enter. You're not, even when I go to church, I'm not looking at the cross, I'm like, man, Jesus, what happened? I'm not doing that. May Allah protect us, right? I mean, we don't believe that was Jesus anyway. We believe that was an extremely righteous companion of Jesus, who's his neighbor in paradise, but we don't worship or any of that business. Right? So yeah, any place. The only place I would probably say is like super off limits is a Luciferian church, right? And pre this, I'm free to believe and do whatever I want type business of this movement of recent times. Luciferian churches were considered blasphemy across the entire world, and now you've got these churches going on around the United States, left and right, where they actually worship the devil there. I don't know why you'd want to go there, but yeah. Take pics.
As far as going to a non-Muslim wedding, like that has its own specific ruling. What about as far as like invitation goes to your own wedding?
So your own wedding, can you write an invitation? I'm confused. What's the question?
No, to non-Muslims
Can you bring non-Muslims to your wedding?
who have like a different who act differently in like weddings,
Well,
wedding settings.
So can you bring non-Muslims who you know may act differently at, okay, so maybe what you're alluding to is, okay, first you're having a separate wedding?
No. So like
Confused.
to your own wedding, can
Yeah.
you invite the non-Muslim people that you know?
Yes.
Who usually how like they have their own. You were talking about how at their own wedding they get
Drunk.
drunk. Yeah. So like could you have those people at your own wedding?
Yes. You absolutely can invite them to your wedding, yeah. Mhm.
Is it recommended, because sometimes we have to keep that in mind, so we cannot be so Islamic in that way.
So never forget this, if the Sharia didn't prohibit something, it's not our job to prohibit it. Allah Azza wa Jalla was very clear about certain prohibitions, and we're not to make things for a just in case. There's very seldom times that a group of scholars would agree on that, but this is not one of them. So if you have a friend who's just appearing drunk to everything you invite them to, that's up to you not to invite them. It doesn't make it halal or haram. Okay? Let's just quickly go. There's other things that actually are also impermissible, which I hope that we can avoid. These are practices that everybody should actually write down and make a mental note so you don't forget and you don't miss them. Very important. 1, showing your awrah in front of men not related to you. This goes for the sisters. I know you guys get all decked out and soup to nuts with 3 levels of paint can on you, and then you get brought down from this staircase and it's awesome. The problem is you don't want to wear something over your head because you don't want to be affiliated with the KKK. The problem here is you still have to, because this is something not permissible for these non-mahrams to see. This is not allowed, but it's a practice that they think, again, it's one night. Remember this kind of one night business? The other one is they also try to show, which is pretty disgusting, they do it usually overseas. I hope nobody's actually practicing this in the United States, is that after Laylatul Dakhla, which is the night of the consummation, the first night, what super weird it happens is the mother-in-law, the husband's mom, to make it even worse, right? She comes in after, and they're dressed up and everything. She takes the sheets that have blood stains on them and she hangs them outside. So everybody, judging by everyone's face, that practice has been shot to hell. And I'm very happy about that, alhamdulillah. That's not Islamic, actually. That is un-Islamic and haram to do.
Why
Next.
would anybody do that anyway?
I don't know, to show that he got himself a virgin, I don't know, man. It's just weird things people do. Putting the Quran on top of the girl's head while she's like walking around dancing with it. I hope none of you guys are doing that. And if you are, please don't do it. This is extremely disrespectful to the Quran. Do not do that. Some people sit there and they spread rice and salt to protect them from the evil eye. So while they're sitting down, the husband and wife on the chair, they start shaking up some rice pieces and some salt pieces. Actually, some of the scholars said this is actually minor shirk. This is minor shirk. Do not do that. Some of them actually say that they bring the gold in front of everyone. It's called Laylatul Libas. So typically they'll do this at a henna for some of the cultural people out there, which is that they have a girls' party where they paint up orange and stuff. So then what happens, they bring this massive pillow, right? This massive pillow that's got this gold all pinned on it, and then they just start taking this, and she starts getting very all decked out with gold everywhere. Sheikh Umar Sulaiman calls this "pimp my wife," and so obviously this is absolutely haram. It's a form of showing off, and you're bringing a lot of riya and hasad. Stop me if you have any questions, because we're almost wrapping up. Okay. Wasting food. Some people they know how many people are attending the wedding, but rather they'll order double just to show that, look how generous I am, and then all of that gets thrown in the garbage. Missing salat. There are some sisters who believe that they can just sit there, they hold it in. I mean, these girls really got to use the bathroom. And so they've managed somehow, by some biological miracle, to hold it in for like a long period of time. And then as soon as Maghrib hits, they get out there quick, they pray up their Maghrib, and then they even ijma' Isha. He said, I got to do it. I have a setup. I have a reason. This is actually absolutely not allowed. Absolutely not allowed. Well, you know, I got my makeup going, and I got this and this. Unfortunately, it's not allowed. But you know, if you really think about it, if you really were able to hold it in that much and you got through Maghrib, I mean, you could just do Isha at the hotel when you're done. So you should be good in that regard. Should be okay. Taking pictures of women without hijab. I will warn you about this. I'm going to say this 1,000 times. This is even for this side back there. If you think that taking a picture without your hijab and it's going online, but it's only shared amongst your friends, and this, they have like these controlled groups, right? You share with which group you want. I am telling you, guys will be seeing it. Whether you want to believe me or not, I'm telling you, and if you already done that, they already see me. I'm telling you already. What is also not allowed is to do a Brazilian wax job by another sister, by another girl. Absolutely haram. Even if it's for one night, they sit there and they want to, you know, that's their night and that's their day or whatever. So it's like funny because they want to like challenge with one another, compete with one another, who gives the gift to the girl of the full spa day. You're not allowed to do it if your awrah is exposed to another female. Okay. Also wearing perfume in public. These are just things that I'm mentioning, so you're aware of them, because my job is just to let you know. And again, if women are dancing in front of other women and men dancing in front of other men in a very provocative and sexual manner, that is absolutely haram. And then we mentioned, I think last time, the sisters know this, alhamdulillah now, that even when they are in their separate areas, there is a level of awrah between themselves, which is that their shoulders to their knee should be covered, to their knees. Right? Because a lot of, you know, you don't know this yet, but we'll see later, is that some, you know, have you got the teardrop thing in the back, and some of that shows, and absolutely things that we want to avoid. Okay? And obviously, if you see the stages that we're kind of going in, wedding night's done, and that's why next week will kind of be a non-recorded week, so that you guys can understand on that level. Any questions on what we covered? Yeah.
Is there any ruling about the length of time allowed between the marriage contract and the actual wedding night? I've heard that it shouldn't go past a year, but I don't know if that's a true rule.
No, there's no such rule at all. Literally no such rule. There's no time frame, but some of the scholars recommended that it's not long. Because to be honest with you, the shaitan starts playing with someone's mind, you know. like you'll start seeing other friends getting married and things like that, and here, you're still waiting for this, this Mr. Prince to come, and it's a year, 2 years now, and now you've just been invited to wedding 2, wedding 3, wedding 4, and then you're like, well, you know, what if I didn't stick around for this fella? I'd have been, you know, I'd been okay right now. So the shaitan starts playing with people's minds, you don't want that, but there's no Islamic rule of that. Yes.
I know for like in Arab culture, a lot of times we'll have like the Kedb Kitab, which is the official signing of the contract, small ceremony in the masjid or anywhere else, and then it'll be like a year until they have the big wedding. But within that time frame, they're technically husband and wife.
So we mentioned this, where you probably missed it. So the answer to that is yes. They are, not even technically, they are husband and wife. The only thing is, by culture, it's understood that you will not consummate the marriage until the wedding. It's understood. Now, if they did consummate the marriage, they didn't do something haram. They didn't do something impermissible. But you shouldn't. You really shouldn't. You should, because you should honor the agreements you guys come up with. Alright?
But other stuff like going out alone or
Absolutely allowed. Yeah.
So where's the limit on intimacy in that case? You know, in the period of nikah.
Don't go in.
Okay.
I don't know how Fiji more you want it.
But within that time frame, it is anything except full consummation.
Yep.
Okay.
Are you speaking, and I'll be frank because there's no, is you talking about oral sex?
No. I mean, like, if it's between that time frame, is that like I feel like
Sometimes you do minds, I don't know what.
No. It's like the engagement period, or a lot of people treat it as if an extended engagement period, but it's more than that. So
You're married.
you're married, so
You're married.
but you just shouldn't consummate fully because it's culturally understood.
Yeah.
But if you're not
I
doing
mean,
that,
I
then it's fine.
wanna ask you, you go to her father and he finds out. Probably gonna get beat up, to be honest with you. Even though you're her husband. While you're getting beat up, you're gonna be saying, well, I didn't do anything haram, you're still getting beat up.
Mhm.
I'm just telling you that. That's probably what's gonna happen, and I feel bad for you. That's all I can tell you. So it's a cultural thing, it's understood by the practice that you're, you know, you guys have agreed upon, okay? We'll actually cover what I mentioned next week, just, clear that up, but anyhow. Any other questions? Going once, going twice, sold. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم العصر إن الإنسان في خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات